Podcast. Thank you so much for hopping on the show. I'm so excited to interview you.
Thanks so much for having me, Lindsay. This is what an honor to be able to come on, your podcast show and chat and talk. I know that we met at We Do, and I felt a connection. And when you asked me to do this, I said absolutely. So I'm finally glad that the day is here and that we can finally have a chat.
Yes, and you are so experienced with this sort of thing because of what you do for a living. So tell our audience about yourself. What do you do? I know you're on maternity leave right now, so fill us in on kind of just your career.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right about maternity leave. So it's a bit of an adjustment for me. I have a new boss. That's what I always like to say. And he's very high maintenance and demanding. But outside of my maternity leave, I am a TV reporter and anchor, and I've been doing it for 15 plus years. There's quite a backstory to how I got into it. We can get into it if we have some time, but it has always been a dream of mine to be a TV broadcaster, journalist. And so I'm actually doing what I've always wanted to do, which is amazing to be able to get up every day and do the thing that you love. You know what I mean? Outside of journalism and the TV world, I also MC and I keynote as well. And it's really interesting because I used to be this incredibly shy, introverted. I'm still introverted. I am, if you can believe it or not, but very, very shy, not a huge public speaker. So this evolution of emceeing and keynoting has just happened organically over the span of my career. So it's been a pleasant surprise and something that I really enjoy doing. And that's where I met you at We Do because I was one of the keynote speakers there. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what I do. And we can delve into more of it if you want to, depending on how deep you want to go and what else you want to talk about. But that's what I do.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I do want to get into that. I'm curious to know, excuse me, when you were first invited to speak, and I guess maybe how that just came about and your reaction to that and what it was like to be up on stage public speaking for the first time.
So the very first time that I had ever graced the stage in a public speaker capacity was 2000 and oh man, 10, I think. So a while ago. And part of my job is to MC. We don't have to do it, but I felt like I needed to do it to get better at this skill. It's very different from being an anchor on television or being a reporter on television and then being on stage in front of a live audience. It's a very different dynamic. And I don't know if people realize that because some people might just automatically assume that, oh, well, she's on TV. She totally can do it. No, no, no. It's completely different. I was working in my very first market in Lloydminster, and I had just started. No, I was actually still a student doing an internship. So it was an unpaid internship. I was still, a student. And one of the community members had asked me to MC an event, and I had never done it before. And I was terrified. And my initial reaction was just to say no. But I feel like at that point in my life, I felt like if there's anything that you are really scared of, especially if you're really, really, really scared of it, whether it brings more opportunities or whether you know where it's going to lead you, you have to say yes. You have to say yes. And that's sort of where everything started. You know what I mean? Even getting into the TV industry, incredibly intimidating, incredibly competitive. You don't know if you're gonna succeed, in this craft, but
Mm.
I felt like if you're scared of it, then you have to give it a try. Because 'cause I'd rather try and fail than never try at all and then wonder for the rest of my life, what if, you know? And so that's sort of what happened with my career and also with the speaking. So I got on stage. I remember I was holding onto the podium on the sides and I was just shaking. I was so scared. And I tried to memorize my script as best as I could just in case I blanked out. But I remember my partner at that time, who's now my husband, he and I were just seeing each other at that time. So he actually came to my very first, like he was there at the very beginning, and I just remember looking at him and just trying to focus on him so that I wouldn't, panic or any of those things that can happen when you're in front of people. So
Mhm.
that was, and as you can tell, I will never forget that moment. You're making me go back in time now and kind of reliving what that was like. You know what I mean? But that's what it was, and it was a really great organization. And what was really awesome about it, the organization raises money to support people and families who have physical and mental disabilities, try to find work, try to get integrated into society. So I always love to support organizations that better the community, that help, those that need it. And after that event, I must have done okay because they asked me to come back the next year. And then as I moved up and I moved out of my very first market and moved to bigger television markets, the organization is, I think, across the country. It has various different chapters. Once I moved to Saskatoon, they were like, "Hey, can you be our MC?" And then as I moved to Calgary, they just kind of followed me along. So I was able to stick with them for many, many, many years, actually.
Cool. And yeah, you mentioned "We Do" a couple times. So for those listening or watching that don't know what that is, it stands for Women's Entrepreneur Day organization, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so they do these really cool events across the country, and they kind of, I think, focus those events on Women's Entrepreneur Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one day of the year, and so yeah, so I had been to a virtual event that they hosted during COVID, and then I had the pleasure of going to a live event and meeting Kathy and seeing her, do her amazing, amazing job of talking to this room full of women, and I knew I just had to have her on the podcast. So, I wanna dive into some of the things I heard you share that day, and so I want to ask you about your parents, and I want to ask you to share a bit of their story and, them coming to Canada and how that looked for them. And then some of the things that they taught you at a young age that you have, that you have adopted into your life.
Of course. When I was crafting together this keynote, I changed the opening so many different times because I really wanted it to make sense with my story, but be impactful as well. As you know, when you only have a certain amount of time, you want to maximize every second that you can and make sure that you are giving value to whoever is listening or watching you with every nugget of information that you give. And I thought, okay, if we're talking about resilience, because that was the theme of We Do this year, I thought, okay, who else better? Um, you know, who the two people in my life that I know without a doubt that embody resilience are my parents,
Mm.
and based on my upbringing and their story, and it really shaped who I was. So it really created a wonderful foundation to help people understand why I am the way that I am. And so, in a nutshell, my parents were refugees from Vietnam. I mean, we can go deep dive into their story completely. And in fact, one of my goals is to produce a documentary on, their story one day, because that's also what I do at CTV. I've produced 5 documentaries so far, and I love doing it. I love the long format storytelling. And yeah, so I'd love to do that one day. But today, for the sake of the timing that we have, both my parents, they escaped the Vietnam War separately, and they both have their own separate stories. So my dad was in the Air Force fighting for the southern Vietnamese side. So without getting into too much of a detail, it was basically a civil war, the North against the South. My dad fought for the South. And after they lost the war, he was captured and was a prisoner of war and stayed in this torturous camp for 18 months before they suddenly released him. And it's really interesting because I don't think no, I know for sure he hasn't told us the entire story, because I don't know if he wants to go there, and also does he really want to delve into such horrific, inhumane treatment and torture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same goes for my mom. Like, she will talk, share little bits and pieces of what she's experienced too. But again, there's only so much that they would go into with us, but I know enough to understand that it's something that a lot of us will never have to go through, thankfully.
Mm.
So my dad was, he was in the Air Force. He was a prisoner of war. He was finally released, and then he came to Canada. My mom was only 19, so a baby basically, and she escaped the war by boat after the South lost. And again, it life or death. Like I remember saying in my talk, she didn't know whether she was going to live another minute or die the next minute. It was the straddling the line between life and death.
Mhm.
And at 19 years old, and having to go through all that. So she ended up in Kuala Lumpur, ended up in a refugee camp. Then the Canadian government sponsored her over. And then my parents met in Canada. And then they kind of started their journey there. But there's one piece that I actually left out of the keynote because for the timing purposes. Even though my parents told me their story as I was growing up, and it really, like I said, it molded who I am today. I really didn't understand the magnitude of just how young, especially my mom, like how young she was and what she had gone through until I took a trip to Vietnam in 2004 with her. And it was my very first trip outside of Canada. And we went to Vietnam, which is if anyone's ever been to Asia, it's a culture shock. Like you feel like you have taken off into space and landed on a completely different planet. And this was in '04. Okay. It's modernized a bit more now, but we're talking it's a developing country. And I remember struggling so much adapting to the heat, the food. I got sick, just the crowdedness, the noise. It's dirty. I mean, it is. It's a reality of not all parts of the country, but yes, very much. The standards are not like here, right in
Mhm.
Canada. And I remember 2 weeks in, I just so badly wanted to go home. I thought I was suffering. How privileged am I? You know what I mean? And I remember being on a boat, a tour boat, and we were on the Mekong Delta. And I remember looking out into the horizon, and all I could see was this lush green jungle. And I remember looking at the water because it was so dirty, it was muddy, right? And my mom comes up to me and I'm having a moment, right? I'm just reflecting on how hard my life is. And my mom comes up to me and she goes, "So you see the horizon? Do you see all that lush green?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "That was the last thing that I saw as my rickety boat left the shores of Vietnam. And I never knew when I would see my family again. This was the last thing that I saw."
Wow.
And guess how old I was on that trip when she told me that? I was 19. I
Okay.
was the same age as my mom when she left. And it was just one of those moments where I went, "Oh my, okay,
Yeah.
wow." Like, "Kathy, you need to buck up because you are soft." Like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You think you're suffering. Imagine being the same age you are right now and seeing this, but you are escaping a war and you have no idea if you're going to live or if you're going to die. Do you know what I mean? And it was that moment that I think was the real moment that I understood just how resilient the both of them, are. And I think that's what I carry with myself all the time when I go through challenging things in my life.
Mhm.
And as you know, I did talk at lengths about some of the challenging things that I had gone through, especially
Mhm.
this year, right? And I think about that, right? I talk about your resilient role models. Use them not to compare yourself to them, because everybody's suffering is very personal and everybody's suffering is very real, right? It's just about using other people to help lift you up, using all the resources that you can to try to get you out of that dark space, whatever that dark space may be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, your parents just sound like the most incredible, brave people. I would love to interview each of them separately. I think that they just sound like just, yeah, incredible, incredible people. All these people that have come to Canada through really dire circumstances, and the work that you do in creating documentaries is just it's so valuable to get these stories out there. So
Yeah.
I look forward to watching some of these ones that you've already produced and seeing what else you create in your career. I think that's so exciting and what a skill set to have
Yeah.
You'd always wanted to be on the news and reporting and sharing people's stories and stuff? Like, what
Yeah.
age did that start? Like, when did you first have that vision for your life?
So I'll tell you, my career has evolved, and we'll get into that in a second, just in terms of like getting into documentaries, because the documentary part was not the thing that I wanted to do at the very start. The documentary thing happened over the last 7 years, I think, and then I realized I'm actually very good at it, and I enjoy it. But I actually knew that I wanted to be on TV. That's how I pitched it to my parents when I was 17 years old. I knew early on I loved to tell stories. I think that's what drew me to the career. It wasn't so much like, oh, I want to be on TV. It was more, I want to tell stories. I want to, talk about the things that happen. I want to share things because, throughout my entire life, I guess I was very artistic. I am like incredibly artistic outside of, the work side of it. I was a competitive figure skater, competitive pianist. So I've always been on some sort of platform expressing myself in some way. And I think that that's where that came from, the desire to share something or talk about something. And I, being this is going to sound very stereotypical, but my parents wanted me to be a doctor. It's very stereotypical of Asian families. And I don't think I think now I could be a doctor if I wanted to, but I think back then it just wasn't something that I was interested in. And I think just having my parents really push it on me really turned me off of it. And so that's something that I'm trying to keep in mind as I'm raising my own son, is to just help him and assist him in learning and discovering what he wants to do, right? Because I'm living proof that if you love it, you will do whatever it takes to make it work. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? And the joy that I have actually doing what I love now is something that's very rare.
mhm.
But yeah, 17, I finally had the courage to tell my parents this is what I want to do.
Mm.
But the way that I said it was I want to be on television. So they were like, "What? You're the firstborn. We escaped the war to make all these sacrifices for you to just want to be on TV. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? What is this?" And I was already in university doing my science degree, on my way to become a med student. And it just, my heart wasn't in it. I just knew it. Just, I don't know if you feel this, or if anybody who's watching feels this, but I just had this gnawing inside me that this is what you're meant to do. It's just this voice, this feeling that I could not ignore, and I don't know how to describe it, but it consuming is the right way to put it. And and so I told them, and they were not happy about it, but eventually I remember I instead of being a doctor and going into med school, they were just happy about me going into, any kind of medical field. So at that time, a lot of my friends were doing optometry school. So I thought, hey, why don't I try the optometry aptitude test? And, all my score, my grades are good and this and that. But I was at that time, I was working at the University of Alberta in a lab, and I was doing research. And I remember these two wonderful women who really saw in me something
Mhm.
that was not fitting for what I was doing there, which was research, right? And they're just like, life is too short. You should do what you love. You should do what you want. But what people don't understand is the pressure of being the firstborn,
Mhm.
the pressure of not disappointing your family. There's a cultural pressure as well. Like, there's just so much that unless you walk a day or a life in my shoes, or you come from a background where it's the same, for you, then you won't understand. It's not as easy as I'm just going to do whatever I want. There's just so much riding on that, right? And so to say that you're not going to do what your parents want you to do is incredibly scary. It is not something that a lot of Asian people, and I'm not just talking Asians, there's lot of other people of different ethnic background out there who can probably relate to what I'm saying, but I'm specifically talking about my culture because there's a lot of people, a lot of my friends who feel the exact same way, and there's a lot of them that just pursued what their parents wanted them to because they just would rather make their life easier and be miserable and, please their parents than to go do what they wanted to do. So I remember taking that leap. I enrolled myself into a broadcasting school, and I didn't tell my parents. And I remember it was around August, September, or no, August, July when I got my acceptance letter. And I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was like, I'm just gonna go. I guess leave the house because I was still living at home at the time. I'm just gonna leave the house and go to school and not tell my parents. Well, they knew what was going on because obviously your parents always know what's going on, even if you don't think so, right? They always do. And I remember I think I was out somewhere. My mom goes, "You need to come home. We need to talk about something." And then so we did. Came home and she basically laid it all out. She goes, "We know what you're doing. We know." So here's the thing. For you to go behind our back and to do this means you must really want this.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely, I do. And so what we did was we struck a deal. It's like negotiating with them. They went, "Okay, you have 4 years. You have 4 years to make it in this industry." And when they say make it, to them, being successful was being on television, right? "You have 4 years to do this. And if you don't, you come home and you do what we want you to do. Get it out of your system, okay?" So I
Wow.
remember I remember sitting there and I was like, "Okay, bring it on. Let's do this." So it wasn't just for me. I went, "Oh my goodness, I cannot go home with my tail between my legs and saying this did not work out. It has to work out." And you know what? Obviously it has. I haven't looked back, you know what I mean? But I hope that, and I told my siblings, I'm like, this isn't to say that you should, or anybody else, to go against what your parents are saying or what they want from you, because all they want is the best. All I'm saying is if you do what you love, it will somehow work out. It just will. But you obviously got to put the work in. And boy, did I put the work in. I put the work in. You
Yeah.
put the work in, but you have the passion and you figure out a way when you feel like there is no way, it will work out the way that it's supposed to. And it certainly has for me in one of the most competitive industries that continues to shrink every single day. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
that's how that all started,
Right.
yeah.
That's awesome. And then when did the first opportunity come into your world for documentary work? How did that arise?
It was actually, so when I first got into the industry, even though I was doing breaking news, hard news, I really loved entertainment at that time. I just loved the allure of celebrities and being on the red carpet and just dressing up. And for some reason, I was drawn to it. And that was my focus for the first part of my career while still doing hard news. So that hard news has always been my bread and butter.
Mhm.
The other stuff was just extra. Then it was in 2016, I covered a lot of entertainment that year because the Junos came to Calgary, and that was an unreal experience. Like just covering the Junos, being on the red carpet,
Mm.
being next to E-Talk. And then after that opportunity, then I got an opportunity with E-Talk to do a stint on their show for one of the musical events. So that was really cool. But then, after a while, I went, "Okay, something is still missing, like something is still missing. What's happening here?" I thought this is what I always wanted to do, but something is still missing. What is it? And I think for me, the biggest thing that I've always said to myself is no matter what you do, have it fulfill like in here, like
Yeah.
make it so that when you go to bed at night, you feel like you've done something to help somebody else. Okay.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for me in 2016, this was a huge left turn in my career. I went from entertainment to documentaries.
Mm.
And I didn't always think that yeah, it wasn't always something that was at the top of my mind, but there were some veteran reporters at my station who had done documentaries before. And I thought, I want to give it a try. Why not? And so I did my very first one in 2017. The very first one was on the Syrian refugee crisis.
Yeah.
And the reason that was chosen was not only because it was the biggest story of the year, but I really felt an attachment to that because of what my parents had been through. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I can tell the story differently because I know and I could feel, especially with the young kids coming in, just a second chance at life for you. I was born here, but still, if my parents had never made it here, I don't know what my life would be right now.
Mhm.
But for especially the children coming here, I'm going, you can have a new life and follow your dreams like me. You know what I mean? And so that was my very first one. So I tried my very first documentary in 2017, and then I never looked back after that. It was improving and improving, and then I went to a conference in the United States. I learned how to do it better, and every documentary after that improved, 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 and it was, 5 documentaries later, it's and so I'm going, "Okay, this is definitely what I was meant to do," and that's the interesting thing about life is you have your goals, but also don't forget to make room for the things that you never expect would happen, and then you realize it later, you're like, "Wow, okay, maybe I'm meant to do this." So, yeah, documentaries give me a chance to dive deeper into the story. And I really love investigative. So, my last documentary was really heavily investigative into the EMS system in Alberta. It's a lot of work. These projects it's not for the faint of heart, but I knew I had to do it because you're looking at uncovering things that the public should know about a system that is meant to help save your life. You know what I mean? At one point, I may need this service, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that is what I'm talking about when I say a service to others. How do you help others in whatever that you're doing? And this was such a beautiful meld of journalism, broadcasting my dream, and then being able to do that thing to help others. Not to say that our day-to-day news doesn't, it does, but this is just a different capacity because you can really dig deep into those stories
Right.
and offer more information to the public.
Cool. Okay, so now I'd like you to share more about becoming a mother as a career woman. And I mean, I think a lot of women really downplay how difficult it is, especially after having such a well-established career and having, your life the way it was and adding a baby to the mix. Like I was one of those people that had a baby kind of by accident when I was 24. So I didn't really have I didn't have anything kind of, going on. I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this now and that's cool. And you like had a baby in the spotlight in front of, tens of thousands of people and
Yeah,
you were critiqued harshly and you heard some pretty nasty stuff
yeah.
from some of the viewers. So tell us about that. I mean, I love how real and raw you are with your stories and just
Yeah.
how you really lay it out there. And I think women are often too shy to just tell it like it is the way you do. So
Mhm.
I'm really excited for you to share this stuff.
Yeah, and you know what, that goes with sharing my postpartum story too at the We Do conference.
Mm,
I remember thinking, okay, what should I share? Because sometimes you're right, women feel like, ooh, I don't want to be so vulnerable. I don't want to be too transparent. And I'm very much like that too. Cause like even on my social media, I curate, very carefully what I'm gonna put out. But I felt the space that We Do was an opportune time to just be real because that's what this is all about. Then what am I doing up there faking it like everything's okay?
yeah.
Because it's not. You know what I mean? And so yeah, just touching really quick on the hate. I mean, I've received hate mail, especially when I joined the weekend show. And I had my show with my former co-anchor. That's who I started out with. It was really difficult because it was relentless and it was all the time to the point where we sort of had to start joking about it just to make light of the situation.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is like if let's say, I don't know, I said something, let's say I didn't get any hate mail, but we joke about it anyway. Oh, let's just wait. Let's see how long it takes for the hate mail to start coming in. You know what I mean? For Kathy specifically. Or if somebody else said something that was like, oh, they're gonna drag Kathy anyway, because she's just easy to hate, And so I got that almost right away when I started anchoring. And my co-anchor didn't get, like, hardly any, and it was really just me, and from how I spoke, to how I presented, to how I looked, to just their disdain and hate for me just existing as a human being, I got everything to the point where I remember coming back from my honeymoon in 2019. And I remember, and I wasn't even thinking about this at all. It was just something that I think subconsciously I had in my mind because of the criticism that I constantly got. I remember going to my husband, should I wear this? This is I love this shirt, but I feel like I'm going to get hate if I wear this. What if I wear this? And I remember him going, okay, stop. Who bleeping cares is what he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Who cares? F them. Just wear
Yeah.
what you
You
want.
can
And I was
swear
like,
on this podcast, by the way.
oh, we can. Okay. Like, he was like, fuck it. Wear whatever you want. Who cares what they say? And I was like, yeah, okay, no, you're right. I needed that reminder and I'm going to need it from time to time.
Mhm.
You're right. You're right. You're right. Bring it on. Let's go. Right. Then when I got pregnant, oh, it was an entirely different story. I mean, I think I got used to the criticism at my best. And I'm talking like looking great, feeling great. As you know, not all women, but some women, pregnancy isn't the greatest experience, and it really wasn't for me. I was swollen from 20 weeks on. I was really big. Like I looked like I was going to give birth to twins. Like it's just the way that my body reacted. So I couldn't hide it. I couldn't hide it very long. And I got a number of very negative emails, but this one in particular, this man was like, um, had to the heavily pregnant women on television. We only tolerate them up to 4 months, like literally just begging for my station to take me off air. And here's the thing: if I was feeling my best and looking my best, I'd be like, shh. But I was feeling so incredibly vulnerable at that time,
Mm.
just the swelling. I ended up in the hospital part way because of high blood pressure, not being able to fit into my clothes, not finding anything that could fit me. Or if it did fit me, the other challenge of being in such a public career, I needed to find something that looked decent. And I was running out of clothes to wear. And what am I going to do? Do you know how expensive maternity clothes is? I'm
Right?
not gonna go out there and spend thousands of dollars on maternity clothes that I may not use again, and it's just so there's that part of it, and so I tried my best to have certain pieces, but that's the thing, I'm like, me just getting out of bed today was hard enough. Me trying to find something to wear to look half decent on air was hard enough. Me, being forgetful or feeling sick or whatever, that's hard enough. And now I have to come to work and then I get this note and I'm going, okay, I'm done. Like I'm just everyone is so mean. And not just that, but during COVID, so the year before, media was a target, for I'm talking the most vile hate that I had ever received in my entire life. I had to get off Twitter because when it was Twitter at that time, it was just too much.
Yeah.
So when it's coming at you all the time like this, and then you get pregnant, and then it's all these other challenges, and then it's like Andrew goes, "You look fat and horrible. Get off," and I'm like, "Okay, it's enough." Like that's enough. And I don't think people see this side of what we do because all they see
Mhm.
is this person who's like, "Hey, good evening. Thanks for joining us." And you
Mhm.
don't think about, "Hey, that person has feelings too.
Mhm.
Hey, what else has happened?" It adds up, and so that was really tough. But like I said in my talk, I decided I wasn't going to let that get to me because I was not going to live in a world where women were shamed for populating the earth.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sorry.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, Andrew, someone brought you into Andrew is the guy who I
Yeah.
can't name because
Andrew, if your mom saw that you just put this email into the CTV, feedback form, she would be appalled and
she would.
embarrassed that you're her child.
Absolutely, right? So that's why I'm like, "Hey, I'm just bringing women into this world, and why am I being shamed about it? Because women are being shamed all the time
Yeah.
for how they look, for how they dress, for how they talk, and then now I'm creating life, and now it's still, grounds to say, 'Hey, you're too fat, you're too this, you're too,'" and so
Mhm.
I'm like, "When is it ever gonna stop?" And I thought, "You know what? I'm gonna keep going. I'm going to show up
Mhm.
every single day, not just on television, but all my speaking engagements too. I don't care how big I get, even though I feel incredibly uncomfortable, I'm still going to show up because I want people to see me. That's the thing. I want people to see me not because I'm like, "Oh, everyone look at me. I hated it." I want people to see me because I want other women to say, "Look at her. Look
Mhm.
at her go. Look how big she is, but she is still doing it." And not just that, I was still hiking. I remember people, on the mountain going, "Whoa," but in like, "Oh my God, good for you." Obviously, I was cleared by the doctor. You want to be safe when you do that. But yeah, on a mountain, at work, on stage. I was at the We Do conference last year, emceeing it, and I was in November. It was in November, so at the very end of my pregnancy, and I barely made it. It's just hard for me to just walk from one end of the stage to the next without feeling completely out of breath. You know what I mean? But I did it anyway. I did it, and I wanted the young girl who is still starting out her career to know that, hey, your life isn't over after or while you're pregnant or after you have a baby. It's
Mhm.
just about figuring out a new path to make everything work. So to your other question, yes, I am now navigating a very different time in my life because I'm at the peak of my career. I
Mhm.
will say while I was on maternity leave, that was a peak of my career because I won the biggest award that I had ever won in my entire life for my project, which made me go, "Oh, this is awesome," right? Because I could have both. I could have a baby and I could still win an award. Like this is what I've always wanted. I so badly want for myself and to show other women that you can have both. You can have a career and you can have children because we can do it all. But it's not about, my friend actually said this the other day and it really resonated with me. It doesn't mean that sometimes you can have it all at once, but sometimes it might not be all at once, and it's okay. But as long
Yeah.
as you keep your eye on the end goal, you eventually could have it all at once. And I was like, "Oh, that's a good one." Because sometimes I'm just like everyone else. You sort of get into your head and you start to wonder, you start to doubt yourself, right? But yeah, so now that I'm at home, I did have reservations about taking a really long maternity leave. But I thought, you know what? I'm all in. This is I called my baby my project B while I was at work. I'm like, this is my project that I'm working on right now. So I'm
Yeah.
going to focus all my energy on my project. And then I'm going to figure out how to have him in my life while I continue on with my career. And I will say a lot of it has to do with just, yes, yeah, would I like to stay home with him until he's old enough to go to kindergarten? Absolutely. That's not going to happen though for me. You know what I mean? For women where it can happen, great. But not all women can do that. I
Right.
have to go back to work.
Yeah.
You know, so he's going to have to go to daycare,
Yeah.
right? And so there are things that have to change. You're going to have to make certain sacrifices. You're not going to get absolutely everything that you want, but if you keep your eyes on the big prize, I'm a firm believer that everything will eventually fall into place and you can have both.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And you told a lot more of the story about some health challenges you had after giving birth to your son that were just heart-wrenching, really, to hear you share that stuff. Like, holy cow. I don't know if you want to get into a little bit of that. I think it would be helpful for just bolstering, the message of, women really can do it all, but they can't necessarily have it all at once. And sometimes things get thrown in our path when we already feel like we can't take anything else on, and you cope, you figure it out, you get help. I One thing I loved about um, you sharing about um, these health challenges that you've had since having your son was the people that you reached out to and asked for help, and the different I guess just the different people that have helped you through it. And so I think a lot of women suffer in silence and they feel alone and they allow themselves to stay there, whether it be because they're having like true mental health um,
Mhm.
challenges from the physical, challenges, or why it is that they stay in that dark place of suffering in silence. I don't know, but I wanted you to share a bit about just the last year
For
of your
sure.
life to inspire women to get help if they're feeling like that. So yeah, share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. And I will say, and I always want to go through life with a positive outlook and say, let's not live so cautiously because we're scared of the bad things that could happen. It's going to happen no matter what you do. but let's hope it doesn't. But then if it does, okay, how do you deal with that bad thing in that moment? Because there's so many bad things that can happen in the world. And especially me being in the news and being, the person that tells those stories, I'm very aware of what could happen. But at the same time, you never think that it could happen to you. And so with my postpartum, I mean, I had a tough pregnancy, like you said, and then just I never would have imagined how difficult it would have been. I thought, okay, I'm going to have to lose all this baby weight. Yes, I had an emergency C-section, so I'm going to have to give that 6 weeks to heal. It does not heal in 6 weeks. I don't know who said that, but that is not true. Okay. So I'm going to lay that straight. And there's a lot of things I learned just about the gap in women's health during my journey. And I'm appalled actually. So I'm thinking, could be something that I look into in a future project, right? Because I am like, this is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah.
But yeah, the health challenges that I had immediately started right after I had my son. I broke out into, and I didn't share this at We Do, so I'm going to share with you now. I
Mhm.
broke out into a massive rash. Like we're talking hives all over my body, everywhere, and my feet were blistering and pussing. That's how bad it was within
Wow.
24 hours of having him, itching everywhere as I am trying to figure out this new baby in the hospital and everything, right? And anyway, I ended up leaving the hospital within, I think it was 2 days, only to be readmitted back into the hospital within 24 hours because the community nurses were so worried for my health. Not even because you see a community nurse within
Mhm.
24 hours of giving birth so they could check your son. They took one look at them, they look at him and they're like, oh, he's great, but like we're looking at you, like what's going on with you? And
Mhm.
like here's, as women, when we're going through that, especially early, like really early postpartum, like you're not thinking straight. Like you're just, like would I have let myself walk out of that hospital if I was completely sound and healthy? No. But in that moment, I'm like, sure, I guess I'm gonna go. And then I'm gonna go. Like, no, like, and I look back and I'm like, my God, like so many things that you should not have done. Not me. I don't want to blame me, but I'm just saying,
Well,
here,
yeah, when medical professionals are giving you the okay to leave, you kind of wanna trust that they know what they're doing.
that's what I mean. And especially
Kind
when
of
you
their
feel.
job.
Exactly, and when you feel vulnerable, you don't wanna be the person because 'cause you're like, "I don't know, maybe they know what's
Yeah.
going," things like that, right? So there's a lot of things that, and if anybody is listening to this or watching this and they've ever been in that situation, just know that, like, don't blame yourself. It's just you are in a different state of mind that you can't control it, right? And you can't blame yourself. And so, I ended up being readmitted, only to then go to a dermatologist who had to do a biopsy right in the clinic to figure out what was going on with me. And then they did. And then I was on medication. It went away within 2 weeks, only then to come back in 5 weeks, 10 times worse. And so here I am trying to deal with my C-section scar, the rash, like breastfeeding my baby, trying to figure that out up in the more like 3 consecutive days. I remember just like scratching like in the bathroom. And I'm going, okay, I'm losing it. And it was tough. So I dealt a lot with like mental health issues at the very beginning too. It was like just despair. It was just, and I don't want to get too much into that, but there was a lot going on at the very beginning. And I remember looking at like all these pictures of all these other women on social media with their beautiful baby, and I'm like, what is happening to me? Like this is not even close. You know what I mean? This is not even a smidget of what I thought this would look like or what people have painted the picture of what new motherhood looks like. I'm like, this is not it. So but it's really interesting because even after all that, the worst was still to come. Like the worst was still to come. And that's when I talked about the diastasis recti at
Mhm.
at the conference. And I remember when I asked the audience, who's heard of it? A number of women did put up their hand. So this is the thing that boggles my mind is DR is common. It's common.
Yeah.
A lot
I
of
wasn't
women don't.
one of the ones that raised the hand. I had no idea about this until I heard your story.
Totally, and then the women who actually find out or know about it, it's because they probably had it, and then they only learned about it after they had it. Otherwise, we're like, "What is this?" What made my case rare was just how severe it was, because again, DR, just so people understand, it's just your baby makes you expand your the tissue that connects your six pack together, right in the middle of your stomach, and so
Mhm.
it makes space. So when the baby expands, this stretches out. But what should happen after you have your baby is that the tissue comes together, and then you're fine. With some women, though, the tissue doesn't completely come together and it leaves a gap in your stomach. Now, the gap can be just this wide, the
Mhm.
gap can be this wide, so mine was massive and two knuckles deep, right? Two knuckles deep.
Mhm.
So you actually could. So when I went to a physical pelvic floor therapist, which I had to find on my own, she literally stuck her entire hand right into the middle of my stomach. I saw it disappear. I'm like, oh, what is happening here? And the reason I ended up going to get a diagnosis, which I had to advocate for and fight for, is because of the health issues that I started experiencing that were not normal.
Mhm.
I was sitting there 3 weeks postpartum, or sorry, 3 months, 3 months, that's 12 weeks after having a baby. Most of my friends were going back to their
Mhm.
normal lives.
Mhm.
I still could not walk properly. I still could not get on the floor, like down on the floor, up off the floor. I couldn't sit down on a couch and hold my baby on my like to breastfeed. I couldn't do that. I had to breastfeed him. Our entire breastfeeding journey was me standing up. I had to hold him standing up because I could not sit down because every time I sat down, there was pressure on my stomach. But the biggest sign that I knew something was wrong was every time I got up and out of bed, it felt like my guts, like my intestines were spilling out of my stomach, and I literally had to scoop my stomach and hold it in. I know. I'm like, that's like, that can't be normal. Like, what is happening to me? And I remember going to healthcare professionals, asking my friends, everyone's like, "Oh, like, one, they're either like, "Okay, we don't know what's going on with you," or two, "Oh, it's early on, just give yourself some grace, just, you know, don't worry, we know how you are, Kathy, you're a go-getter, so just," but I'm like, "Hey, no, I'm not talking about the weight. I am talking about something is wrong. Something is wrong with me." And so I pushed for an ultrasound. Guess what? I knew it. And so this is a lesson to anyone is
Mhm.
trust your gut. Like
Mhm.
literally I had to trust my gut. Trust your gut. If you feel like something is wrong, keep fighting. Like demand whatever it is that needs to be done to figure out what it is, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Lo and behold, it was diastasis recti. I knew something was wrong with me, and the severity, like I said, is what made it so rare. And then after that, it was just, okay, what do we do to fix it? But I mean, I know that I don't want to say that I'm being nonchalant about it right now, but it was hard. Like it was a tough time.
Mhm.
It was so tough. Like I fell into such a dark hole that I had never been in my entire life.
Mhm.
And I have a newborn that I'm now responsible for, and I will tell you in that moment, this was the last thing that I wanted.
Mhm.
All of this was not what I wanted because of just all the extra health issues that I had to go through, that I went through. I
Mhm.
mean, it's hard enough being a mom when you're healthy and everything goes according to plan. Then add on all this other stuff on
Mhm.
top of how difficult it is to be a new mom, a mom to a newborn.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, it was so tough. It was so tough. And so I just remember when I finally pulled myself out and I said, okay, I have to do something. I can't just because I have a choice here.
Mhm.
I'm either going to continue to suffer, but if I continue to suffer, what does that look like? I'm not going to have a good quality of life because I can't walk. So things were a little bit more dire for me. It's not like, and I don't want to say, discredit anybody's suffering. Because again, like I said, it's personal and it's very real. But in my moment, I'm like, hey, it's time is of the essence here because if I don't figure out what to do here, I'm not going to be able to walk in 6 months. How am I supposed to go back to work? How am I supposed to, so there's a lot of things at stake here that required me to get better.
Mhm.
And that's where, the help came in that you talked about, that I couldn't do it on my own. Absolutely not. I didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
Surgery was an option, but I mean, I'm like, I just had my stomach cut open, for to pull the baby out. No, absolutely not. I'm not gonna get surgery. Like that is absolutely not.
Yeah.
There has to be something else. I just delivered a baby. This is a routine. Like, what is wrong? Like, you know what I mean? Does every woman get surgery after she has a baby? Like, what's happening here? And so, I ended up finding a specialist, and, she and I tell her this all the time, we're actually really good friends now. So that friendship blossomed, again, the unexpected things in life that can happen that are so wonderful. And, she really helped give me my life back. Mind you, I put in a lot of work. Obviously, I did the work myself, but I had the guidance. And sometimes, yeah, you don't be afraid to go and and seek the help to help you. I know that women are known just inherently to just say, we'll just do it ourselves and we will just suffer in silence. And I am definitely, uh, I've done that many times.
Mhm.
But I realize now not only talking about it helps, it helps such a great deal because
Mhm.
you never know who else is going through something. And it doesn't have to be what you're going through because all it has to be is you've suffered, I've suffered, you've overcome it, I can overcome it.
Yeah.
It can still be relatable no matter what. Even if, people listening or watching haven't gone through DR or postpartum issues or challenges,
Mhm.
can still pull something out of my challenges and my story. And I know that because of all the women that came up to me after the We Do conference who didn't go through what I did, but were like, okay, that resonated with me. That resonated. And so I've discovered that just by being vulnerable, right place, right time, and opening and talking about things that you've gone through and have overcome, although not easy, but still completely possible, how it can help others too. And not just that, not just the talking about it, but enlisting people to help you along the way because you can't always do it by yourself. And why do it by yourself when you can find others who can help you, right?
Yeah, and like you said, trusting your gut, like finding out that, they wanted to just perform a surgery on you and you being like, what? That doesn't feel right for me. I'm going to look for other options. And then finding this person who has helped you take all the steps to healing yourself without the surgery. I think women really do need to trust their intuition more. And I hope that at the very least, if the one thing people take away from this, I hope that it's that they should trust their intuition and that women, especially new mothers, really do have a lot of natural instincts going on in them and they really need to listen to them.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're just such an inspiration, Kathy. Your story, and I know this is probably just a fraction of the stories you could have shared with us in this time, and I would love to have you back on the podcast another time to hear more of your stories. But yeah, way to go for just being someone who chases their dreams relentlessly and who has probably just made your parents so incredibly proud in the process. And yeah, say hi to them from me. I would love to meet them someday. They just seem like such fantastic people. And your little guy, he's a lucky little man to have you as a mom.
Oh, thank you. Yes, no, he obviously made everything worth it.
I bet. I bet.
But I hope one day, when he hears the story of what his mom went through, that he could be inspired by it as well, to know that, it wasn't easy, but she still fought. And,
Yeah.
not just the postpartum stuff, but just, my career, following your dreams, working hard, achieving the things that you want, because again, I want to stress the hard work. Yes, it's going to take work. Nothing worth it in life or nothing that you really want, comes easy. No matter what it is, it doesn't matter if it's health issues, health challenges,
Mm.
career challenges, career goals, health goals, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
it's going to take some work. But remember my mantra, one foot in front of the other. I always
Yeah.
say that. And it just, especially during this postpartum period and getting to where I'm at now.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Like every day, one step forward. And then, you look back on the year and you go, holy smokes,
Yeah.
that was a mountain. You know what I mean? So
So
yeah.
where can people find these documentaries that you've produced? Where is the best place to stay connected with you?
Yeah, so to stay connected with me, I'm active on LinkedIn. So look me up, Kathy space Lee, Kathy Lee. I'm sure you could just Google up Kathy Lee CTV LinkedIn, Kathy Lee CTV Instagram. So those are the two that I am more active than the other. I try to have my space, and just like because I don't think we do it enough to have a break from social media and just be present and right. And then if people are interested in watching the documentaries, I definitely watched the last one that I did, investigation into EMS. Just go CTV Kathy Lee, Google up documentaries, Google up EMS documentary, Google up the other ones I've done, Asian hate. But if you just look up my name and attach it to CTV and say documentary or something, something will pop up.
Okay. We'll link to a couple of them in the show notes for sure. We'll find
Okay,
we'll
sure.
find a couple of them and link to them in the show notes to make it easier for people. So
Sure, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I can even send you them and then you
yeah.
How about I send them to you because I
Yes,
want
please.
them.
Thank you. That'd be fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful holiday season with your family. And yeah, thanks again for taking the time to share some of your stories with us today. And yeah, I just look forward to seeing what kind of things you get up to next. And just I'm really glad that we're connected now. And I hope to see you again in person in Calgary at an event or something.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Lindsay. Have a Merry Christmas and